Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for February 15th, 2023. It's currently 7:02 in the evening. We'd like to start with a roll call of members. I've got myself. Corey Colquist is not here. Valerie Orlett is not here. Samuel Clark.
Here.
Beth Wensloff.
Here.
Buckley Simmons.
Here.
Dante Tomasoni is not here, and neither is Councilor Geisler. Moving on, we look for an approval of this evening's agenda. Can I get a motion, please?
Sam Clark with the motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Thank you for that. Can I get a second?
Simmons with a second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Number 3 this evening, I'm looking for an approval of the minutes from the January 18th, 2023 regular meeting. Can I get a motion on that, please?
Wensloff moves.
Thank you for that. Can I get a second?
Clark with the second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Number 4, public discussion. Is anybody here to speak on anything that's not on this evening's agenda already? Not seeing any, we'll move on. Number 5 is the first of public hearings this evening. We've got 5A. It's an application by Titan Premier LLC for a preliminary and final plat of 8 lots on an 8.1 acre site located on Stebner Road. The property is located in an R3 zoning district. Eric, what do you have for us on this one?
Great, thank you very much. On your screen right now is the location map of this proposed property in red. It's located essentially in the southwest quadrant of Hermantown Road and Stebner Road. This is an 8.1 acre property. It's proposed to be divided into 8 separate lots. This has an R3 zoning associated with this. If you recall, this past October, there was a application to basically subdivide this property as well. Then we subdivide this 8 acres from the cemetery at that point and rezone it from P public to R3. That was approved by the city council back in October of 2022. So what is proposed this evening and I can zoom in a little bit more as well, but it's an 8 lot subdivision of that 8.1 acres. As you can see, the how the lots progress as you move down south on Stebner Road. All of these lots meet or exceed the R3 minimums as far as size. And to help you out with that again, R3 zoning requires a minimum of 1/2 acre and a minimum of 100 feet of frontage. Lot 1 has the ability to take access either off of Hermantown Road or potentially off of Stebner Road, with lots 2 through 8 drawing access off of Stebner Road. The wetland that is shown on lot 8, this is per the National Wetland Inventory. So one of the conditions of this evening is that wetland will have to be delineated this May when the delineation season starts. And as part of that as well, another condition is lots 7 and 8, no building permits will be issued on those lots until that delineation is done and approved. But this at least allows the applicant to subdivide this property at this stage and then progress on lots 1 through 6 with any potential sales if they so desire. And then obviously 7 and 8 would basically come online from a buildability standpoint later on this spring. The water and sanitary sewer are located in Stebner Road. The water is located on the east portion of the roadway and the sanitary is located on the west side. So the applicant and or their builders will need to coordinate with city staff, i.e. the city engineer, as well as public works on the best way to connect these lots. Whether there's a single cut in Stebner Road or multiple cuts basically to draw from that those individual services that way. Each property will incur park dedication of $1,100 per lot, as well as applicable connection fees, both for sanitary sewer and for water purposes that way. So if this is actually going forward, this would be on the city council agenda for March 6th. And the city council will be the ultimate group that takes action on this plat, as the planning and zoning in the and plats are a recommending body. So that concludes my staff report at this stage.
Thank you very much for that, Eric. Commission members, any questions for Eric this evening? I just have one. City Gas, I think, stops at that intersection. Do you know if City Gas keeps going past?
I
it?
do not know that. No, we don't have the greatest maps because it's a private utility versus a public utility.
Sure.
So we try to work with the provider as best we can. I know in the instance of this applicant, it's Kevin Kuklis of Titan Premier. He recently did some work over on Getchell Road. In that case, he did coordinate the extension of gas.
Gotcha.
So I believe if there would be the option, he would try to work with that group to extend gas. If
I
possible.
think it goes to that intersection. I don't think it goes further south than that, because I think the neighbors on the other side of the street have been trying to get it as well, and it might be beneficial for everybody in there.
Okay, well,
Yep.
that's good.
Okay. Commission members, any other questions or comments on this before we open it up?
Clark, I just had one comment. I thought with the rezoning to R3 and the lot size and with at least how it's platted, it seems very consistent with Hermantown and what people have enjoyed.
I agree. It's no different than the houses across the street, basically.
Great.
Very similar. Sir, by any chance, are you the applicant this evening or representing the applicant?
No, the applicant is Kevin Kuklis. Unfortunately, he's not being able to zoom in at this point yet.
Okay. But we'd like to open up the floor for a public discussion. It's currently 7:09 PM. If you'd like to come up and speak on this matter, please come up and do so. Please state your name and address for the record as well.
Thank you. John Muehlbauer, 3785 Stebner Road. And my wife and I, Carol, own the most southern, the southern resident, the closest southern residence to that.
Sure.
To the plant on the same side of the road there. So we just have some questions, and I don't know if you guys can answer them or not. But one thing I know we were questioning is, you know, we've been paying on assessments for the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years there. Will the new lots be assessed and will other residents of that road for that project be reimbursed anything? How does that usually work?
So how assessments are you, were you assessed for sanitary sewer or for, do you know what the assessment was
the
for?
road and then sewer, it was the sewer project.
Okay,
We got new sewer there back in 90, I think it was 96 or something like that.
sure. With that, basically all the new lots on here, they actually have a new connection fee of $5,000 for sanitary sewer. There are other applicable hookup fees for water and sanitary sewer.
Yeah.
I think in the past, those are generally about $2,000, $2,500.
Mhm.
So all told, they'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of plus or minus $7,000, $8,000
Right.
is what they'll incur as far as utility connections for this.
Okay, so if we split that project amongst us, the residents that were there, we basically, are we compensated anything? Because obviously.
No, you're not.
Oh, okay.
No, you're not.
All right.
And that's the way it is in any project in the city.
Okay, that answers that question. So I'm assuming obviously these are residential homes, correct? There's nothing going up that's on that corner that's.
There are 3 zone properties. They're each being platted for approximately about 0.6 acres. So, I mean, just by subdividing that, I mean, it's setting it up for single family homes.
Single family
Mhm.
homes, right? Obviously with the wet lands that are just north of my house.
Oh.
We have concerns about how that's going to be affected too. Are we going to get more water? Because my driveway goes down and then up. And I know I had to mitigate my wetlands even where my driveway went when I built. So I have some concerns about making sure that the water still flows. We've always had problems at that location, kind of right where that lot 8, 7, and 8 probably are going.
Yep.
In the spring, we always have water standing on the road there a lot of times, so we have concerns.
There was a
about-
good puddle the other day.
What's that?
There was a good puddle right in front of your
Yeah.
house the other day.
Yeah, there always is. Whenever we get rain this time of year or anything like that. So I just want to make sure that there's a really good water flow through there. Otherwise, my driveway is going to really have some problems.
Yeah, right now, as I have on the screen, this is the lot 8. And so right now they're proposing plus or minus 55 feet basically of what we call upland area, that a driveway can come through here with a building pad back in this area to try to be outside of that wetland area. But once again, we'll know more when the wetland delineation is done this spring.
Yeah, and then I'm assuming the builder is going to probably be allowed to bring in fill. Will that be necessary? Do we know any of that yet?
We don't know at this stage.
Okay.
Yeah, this is strictly a land split at this stage.
Okay. And then obviously we wanted to add value. I think we were concerned that it was going to be maybe a larger multi-family building similar to what's on air. What's it? Ugstead and 53 there.
I heard those rumors too.
The airy
Yep.
building. Good to know it's not that, especially being we have the, the beautification of Hermantown. I talked about that the last time we were here. All the trails we're trying to do and keep our city beautiful. So I'm glad to see that it's individual homes. I was hoping that's the way it was. Will there be any requirements of the builder to have certain specifications on how the homes either look or?
No, we have nothing like that in our city ordinance. The only thing that we have is we have a minimum minimum footprint of, I believe it's 792 square feet and a minimum width of 22 feet. So that basically precludes someone from trucking in a single wide home.
Oh,
So, yeah, exactly. We, at least that's as far as we go. We have no covenants, building restrictions, materials, et cetera, anything like that
okay.
in the city.
Okay, great. And then we expect that to stay R3 and then R3. It's not going to go to some other, it can't go to some other more commercially.
It would, I mean, if they ever, I mean, the applicant is put a lot of time and money into doing this.
Yeah.
And they would essentially have to start back at square one and pretty well scrap the project if they tried to do something else, and it would go before this body and be notified.
Okay.
But that's what, I mean, right now, this developer, that's what he does. He does single family homes.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yep, he's just finished some things. It's called Radar Run over on Radar Road in Getchell. That's almost the same type of idea. It was an infill of 6 lots on that property.
Yeah.
He did a single family development called Thilke Circle. It's just north of Arrowhead and just west of Ugstead Road. It's
Okay.
a small
No, my
cul-de-sac
wife
over
was
there.
impressed with Square 37.
Yep.
Whatever that
Yep.
is. So.
Same guy.
Mhm.
She was happy with that.
It's
So-
very nice.
So I think that answers all of my questions, and then just obviously being respectful of the neighboring cemetery. I know my wife has her entire lineage there, so just a request if we can just make sure we're very respectful of that property too. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming tonight.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Not seeing anybody else, we'll close the public meeting at 7:15. Commission members, any other questions or comments on this evening?
I have one question, Eric. In essence, we're looking for approval on lots 1 through 6. Correct.
Actually, no, we're looking at the entire plat.
Okay.
All that what we would do is lot 7 and 8.
Okay.
We would not issue building permits on those until the delineation
And
is
if
done.
they did not get approved, would he be able to adjust lot 6, or how would that work then?
What you would probably do is you would turn 7 and 8 into an outlot and then subdivide those at a future time.
All right, thank you.
I have one question on the wetland. Do we restrict, does the city restrict causing water to flow differently on another lot? Is that one of the restrictions, that they cannot build up in such a condition that you cause damage to another property?
In the case, let's just look at it from a wetland. It would have to, any wetland impacts have to go through, it's called the technical evaluation panel. And they would, recommend, can fill happen or not. Each property within the city and wherever is allowed up to either 10,000 square feet of wetland fill or 5% of the total wetland on site. So basically the wetland that's on this property, yes, there could be a small amount of potential wetland impacts, potentially for a driveway, or if this wetland comes in a little bit bigger that way. As far as water flowing into other properties, generally our residential, we figure for our stormwater ordinance, approximately 9,100 square feet of impervious surface is generally the number. So it takes into account a driveway, any sidewalks, building pad, et cetera, that way. Given the fact that this is almost a 2.5 acre site in this particular case, that we would see very little, if any, additional water really flowing into this wetland. More the concern from the technical evaluation panel is they want to make sure that water continues to get to these wetlands as part of development to keep them.
Right.
Exactly, that
Okay.
we don't want to cut off water sources and dry up our wetlands.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Eric. Commission members, any other questions or comments? Not hearing any, I look for a motion on 5A this evening.
Simmons with a motion for 5A approved.
Thank you for that. Can we get a second?
Clark with a second.
Thank you for that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Not hearing any, the motion passes. Number 6, continuing business.
I think what I'd like to do is maybe just have a brief discussion, but I'm going to flip the order since we have Mr. Jeff Miller of HKGI on the line and basically address the new business first, the comprehensive plan presentation.
Perfect.
And then once Jeff is done, maybe go back to continuing business if we want to have maybe a brief discussion, particularly on the sign ordinance. And if there's any comments so far from the group. But at this point, Jeff, and I'll attempt to make you the host on this as well. I'm going to stop sharing. And then, like I said, I'm going to attempt to make you the host.
Sounds good to me.
There you go.
Oh.
Well, great, Jeff, you're the host, so thank you.
Yep, that looks like it worked. Okay. So let me see if I can pull this up. Are you seeing my screen now? Oops. Let me try that again.
There we go, we have you now.
You're seeing that?
Yes, we are, thank you.
Okay. All right. Good evening, Chair and commissioners. I'm going to go through an overview of the project so far, and then we'll have an opportunity for some discussion of the key issues and priorities with you all for the comprehensive plan at the end. So I have a lot of slides, and I'll go through them pretty quickly so that we have time to talk. And we can go back to any slides, once I've gone through them. And if there's anything that's a specific interest, we can talk about those slides. And then we can make this available, the presentation available to you after the meeting if you want to look at things closer. There's a lot of maps in here. And as I'm sure you're aware, Hermantown's a big city spatially, so it's hard to see details on maps when you're looking at the whole city. And just in case people have not met me before, which is probably true. I'm Jeff Miller. I'm a planner and an associate with HKGI, which is a smaller firm in Minneapolis. We have done planning work, design work with Hermantown before. We worked on the marketplace concept quite a few years ago now. I think John Mulder said maybe 10 years ago.
I think it was back in
Something like that.
2014, yes.
Yeah. And then we also worked with the city on the, locating the alignment for the, what was then called the Hermantown Proctor Munger Trail Spur, which I think you've renamed now to be more of a community trail. So we feel like we know the city fairly well. So I'll move right through these slides. Short agenda. As I said, we're going to talk about the project overview, existing conditions, both mapping data, kind of fly through some emerging trends that we typically talk to with communities, and then like to get your perspective on ones you think are especially relevant for Hermantown at the end. HKGI is our firm. We are working with a firm called Civic Brand, and they will be really focused on the visioning part of the project. And we're right now looking at that effort being focused on the end of March. So we'll be talking to you and others about dates at the end of March. That really will dig in and try to get at what the plan vision should be for the comprehensive plan, which is something that's not, I would say that the vision's not super strong in the current plan. So we're really excited about this. We know that Hermantown's done a lot with visioning and branding and identity already. So we think that this is a really, will be a really strong component of the comprehensive plan when it's done. And then this is just a picture of the other people in our firm who will be or have been working on the project. So we have a solid team to put together the plan. And then as far as the project team from the staff side, you can see the names there from Hermantown. And then there is a steering committee that's been in place that we'll be meeting with periodically throughout the project. There's kind of 9 steps to the process. We right now are in step 3 and are trying to, after we get your input tonight, trying to kind of wrap up the existing conditions analysis and then go into the vision part of it, and then start talking about future directions, concepts, and changes to the maps and that sort of thing. And then the last thing you'll see on the list there is the work scope from the city's RFP was to also do kind of a high-level evaluation of the existing city ordinances, the zoning ordinance, and the subdivision ordinance. So that will happen at the end of the project. Schedule. Again, we can make this available, but the intent is to finish it up by the end of 2023. So right now we're in February, so things are picking up. We spent a lot of time this fall, winter on getting data and GIS files together to create existing maps. As you may know from your current plan, there's not many maps in there at all. So typically a comprehensive plan has quite a few maps in it related to land use and transportation and parks and natural resources and all those things. So you'll see as we go through the next slides, we have created a lot of maps now that will really be helpful for the city to plan going forward. Basics of a comprehensive plan would be to have a land use chapter, transportation, a section on utilities and parks. And it's really the basis for planning decisions over the next 10 to 20 years related to capital investments, regulations and zoning subdivision, but updating those to match up with the new plan, setting policies, and then initiatives that again support the comprehensive plan. As you probably know, the first plan was in '76. There was an update in 2001. There were some amendments in 2014, which were not super significant. So this is a big deal. This plan update. It's going to be a new plan for the city. So again, I'll go through these maps pretty quickly. You don't have to try to see things necessarily. Just it's more of an awareness of the types of maps that will be in the plan and that we've been able to put together so far, and we feel really good about that, knowing that we started with very little mapping in the current plan. So I'll just jump right into those. So just as a foundation, these are the maps that are in the plan today. And I think that's the only 2 that are in there. So as you can see, they're pretty outdated. They're not, they're not GIS oriented maps. They're not detailed. They really just talk about 5 different areas of the city. In the map on the left side, excuse me. And then on the right-hand side, the urban services boundary, which, that's more than 20 years old now. So those are key parts of the plan that we'll be focused on as we put this one together. we created just a basic map, or I'm sorry, a base map, something that we hope will be helpful for people to use as orientation for the city when we're talking about different areas of the city. Again, as you know, it's a big city. You know, the eastern half is more developed than the western half. There's the discussions about what's urban versus suburban and what's rural. But this base map, you know, shows the creeks and the major roads, where the parks are today so far, and really just gives you, and some you get some landmark places like schools, city hall, and that sort of thing. So just to help people as we're talking about the different parts of the city. Hydrology and water resources, you know, again, trying to make kind of really clear, simple maps of different layers of how the city comes together. So this one just showing the many creeks and the river, and then the wetlands. As you know, there's a lot of wetlands in the city. Floodplains. The city has a floodplain overlay district and then a shoreland. So all that stuff that makes up the waterways of Hermantown. Existing landscape and land cover. Again, showing the wetlands, but also getting into like the forested areas, the ag areas, grasslands, that sort of thing. The existing land uses map, which is the map that's taken the longest to put together. Typically, cities don't have the greatest data for this. So, you know, we started with county data related to tax classification, and then went in and made this into more meaningful kind of categories that reflect the zoning districts that you have today, and then also the land use designations that will be in the plan related to creating a future land use map. So this also shows we've taken a stab at land that you could look at as being vacant, especially over on the west side of the city. We feel like there's more work to do on that, because vacant can mean different things to different people. And then also, rather than calling it vacant, any lots that have been platted but have not been built on yet, we've tried to identify those too, to show kind of the inventory of lots that are out there that are slated for residential. And then this map is just pulling that out so that we can get a better picture of where is there land that could be developed, and start relating that to the sanitary sewer and the water lines. A parks map that shows trails, planned, existing, and sidewalks. A roadways map, one of them that just focuses on how they're used. So whether they're principal arterial roads or highways, so 53 on the north side, and then 2 on the south or the west side, and then minor arterials versus collector roads, and all the way down to local roads, versus who owns the roads. So, you know, MnDOT has the red roads, the county has the gold roads, the city has the green roads, and so forth. The sanitary sewer system today and planned, so showing the, I guess, kind of in the neon green, the current plan for extensions, whenever that might be. And then also the water system plan, or existing. I can't even see this that well. I'm not sure if, yeah, I guess it is showing. Actually, I don't think it's showing planned water lines yet.
I think those are all existing right now, Jeff.
Yeah, I think so too. And then onto the zoning map, showing the zoning districts, which you're probably the most familiar with as being on the Planning and Zoning Commission. But as you can see, and we'll talk about this as we go through the project, but even later tonight, you know, for residential especially, there's just not many zoning districts today. So all this bright yellow is all R3. The lighter yellow, I believe, is R1. And then this brown over here is the, help me out here, S1.
S1.
Yep. And then you can see commercial and industrial. Obviously, not all that is developed today. And then one thing that's been really helpful when we worked with multiple communities is zoning maps. If I go back to that, they get kind of hard to understand, like, what is that showing? Is that smart the way the zoning districts are placed or not? Do we have too much of something or not enough of something? So we typically try to zone just the kind of categories of zoning districts. So this map's just showing residential. So as I described in the first map, this shows the 3 residential districts. There is a 4th one on the map, but it's very limited in where it's applied, the R3A. And it's not even on the map, but there is an R2 district in your zoning code that's not applied at all. So that's the kind of stuff that we'll update the plan first to identify where you want to go with, in this case, residential, and then we'll update the zoning to align with that. Commercial, you can see the commercial districts that exist today, mostly along 53 and then the Hermantown marketplace. Business or industrial zoning districts, you can see where those are located today on the zoning map. Again, existing conditions, we're capturing where the population is at. We know that Hermantown's been growing in a healthy way, especially compared to the rest of the county. So we're working on projections for this plan since it's meant to be a 20-year plan. And relative to the county's not planned to grow. So you can see 2000, the population, what it was in 2021, it actually went down a little bit. And, based on actually the national projections and the state projections right now, show the county dropping down to, as low as 175,000 over that time period, which we all know is not very predictable. It's hard to predict 25 years out like that. But that's the projections that are out there. So just to be aware of that when we're looking at Hermantown's projections. And then, we've captured age trends. We're seeing that younger families with children are, more of them are moving into the city. And also the population over 65 has been increasing significantly, linked to the baby boom demographics or trend. Employment trends, how many businesses there are, how many households have college degrees, how many employees are in the city, major sectors, all that sort of thing we'll be looking at. Where people work in Hermantown and in the region, we can capture that. So the really dark areas are where the highest concentration of jobs are today. Let me say that in a different way. This is where Hermantown employees live. So this is showing of all the employees in Hermantown, where they're coming from. So you can see the darkest spots are where employees are coming from for their jobs. And then this one is showing where Hermantown residents work. So you can see obviously Duluth has the highest concentration of where people are going to their jobs. If you live in Hermantown today. And then you can kind of see the numbers showing how many people are commuting into Hermantown, which is the 3,700 number here, versus how many people are commuting out of Hermantown. So net, Hermantown is attracting more employees than people that are leaving, which is a good sign. And then just market trends as far as the types of businesses that are in Hermantown and which ones have potential or opportunity to increase their presence in Hermantown. So lastly, just some emerging trends in all communities that we talk about related to commercial trends, industrial trends, office trends, and then housing trends. So again, I'm not going to dwell on these. I'm just going to kind of go over them, and then we can talk about things that you feel like might be most relevant to Hermantown as we plan for the next 10 to 20 years. So commercial, as everybody knows, it's changed and is changing dramatically. Retail in general is becoming more experience-based rather than people having to go to a store and buy everything there. It's more about going there and getting a sense of what they're interested in, having it be a fun experience. And then they may or may not actually purchase it there because, as you know, there's a lot of e-commerce and delivery to homes and that sort of thing, which was happening and increasing, but with the pandemic, kicked into full gear, of course. Smaller store formats, there's a lot of that happening. Even stores like Target, Kohl's, whoever when they're building new stores, they're oftentimes doing smaller stores. And then those stores may be supplemented by larger stores where there's more inventory. But that means, in theory, stores can be closer to people if they're smaller rather than always have to be the big box store that can't be very close to as many people. Desire for commercial areas that have unique places to go so that people actually want to go there, have a sense of place, places that people can gather. There can be things that happen there, whether it's like food trucks or, eating outside, pop-up markets, that sort of thing. So in that way, catering more to smaller scale developers and retailers, so it can be more unique businesses, again, not just areas with big box stores. And then of course, drive-throughs, pickups, curbside, all that kind of stuff is, it's been popular because of the pandemic. And just things have changed with people, some people working at home a lot these days. Delivery-based food, if people are doing a lot more takeout than in restaurant sort of business, kitchens don't even have to actually be in the restaurants. They can have kitchens somewhere and they deliver most of it, or it's takeout. Industrial trends, there's increased demand for warehousing based on all the stuff we've been talking about and supporting the shift to e-commerce. Location and design needs for warehousing. Companies are trying to get closer to customers. We all see, the trucks from different businesses coming into neighborhoods and dropping things off. So, they like their warehouses to be closer so they can cut down on their driving costs. So, warehouses are becoming smaller in some cases. And then also if a retailer has a big building and they don't need it all, some of those retail buildings are also becoming partially warehouse spaces. Some of the challenges with industrial is that and we've all heard about this, there's increasing challenge to find employees for manufacturing jobs. And then there's also the shortage of housing that's affecting a lot of things, but also being able to attract employees if you don't have the right housing or enough housing for people to live in. It's not affordable. As you know, a good example for Hermantown is the expansion of Cirrus. And we're aware that there's been discussions about how does that housing that's going to be needed for those employees get located and get produced so that those employees can be attracted to that business. Office trends, big impacts on office buildings and where people are working. So, some of the statistics out there that over half of Americans have the opportunity to work at least partially from home. So just the demand for office space and office buildings, in downtowns is much different than it was a few years ago. And there's been some opportunities for more what's called co-working spaces or hoteling, places where people can go to work when they need to, meet up with people, or they need services that they don't have in their individual homes. But as you can imagine, that's resulting in a lot of surplus office space in a lot of places today. And then lastly, housing trends. Some of the things that are being looked at and considered today is demand for more apartments, allowing missing middle housing, which is trying to get at the need for a greater diversity of housing types or options for people, especially as people are moving through, their life cycle from, moving out of their parents' house, living alone for however long, maybe having a family, then needing a bigger space, the empty nester part of your life, down to, getting elderly and needing services with your housing. So kind of a popular concept that a lot of communities are really looking into is this thing called missing middle housing. So instead of just having zoning codes that say, where can we have single family, where can we have maybe a duplex or two family, and then everything else is called multifamily a lot of times, really honing in on what are other housing types that people are interested in or would need as they go through their life cycle. And this graphic here is trying to show the broad range of housing types that not fit into all communities, but every community probably would be interested in or benefit from having more housing options than they have today. And that gets into things like live work housing, where maybe it looks like kind of a townhouse and the bottom floor is actually an office of some sort or an art studio, and you might live above it or behind it. Modular construction is becoming more popular to cut down on costs, to have more affordable housing. And, in theory, it's supposed to be better housing, better built because it's being built in a, non-weather situation. Looking at lot sizes and whether there's opportunities to reduce them in a lot of cases, because maybe some people want smaller yards or less maintenance. And then the affordability side to that. And then even things like build to rent, single family housing developments is something that's happening. We're aware of that happening in the Twin Cities and in multiple places for sure. So that was a lot. We just wanted to give you a sense of what are the things that we're looking at as we start to build Hermantown's comprehensive plan and get into discussions. Just in case you weren't aware of this is what was identified in the RFP as some of the city's priorities going into this planning process. So it said, the city's interested in enhancing the quality of life and supporting land values, over the future 20 years. Supporting economic development is important. Evaluating the adequacy and relevance of the existing zoning and subdivision ordinances for development purposes. Housing's been a topic. We have met with HEDA and then also with the steering committee, and housing's definitely come up as a priority so far. And then some things may be related to the airport we might need to deal with. And that's it. So I'm sorry that's a lot of information in a short amount of time, but we don't want to take all the time just doing presentation, but just wanted to give you a sense of the topics and then see if you had questions about anything that we presented, and then get your input on some of those key things that trying to highlight in this slide with these questions. So I don't know, Eric, do you want to handle the questions or do you want me to?
I think right now, I just want to keep rolling with it that way, and I'll kind of interject with some different things. I've got some thoughts as you've been going through it, and I might ask you to roll back to a couple maps as we go on, but I'll let you still take the lead on this.
Okay. Yeah, so feel free we're open to any comments that you have that don't relate to specific questions that we have here, but just as a starting point, we talked about a lot of trends. Are there current trends that you feel are most important to Hermantown as we look to plan for the long term?
Well, I would think that you'd want to make sure that we're focusing on the housing issues, the different types of housings that are available. Like you said, a lot of places are just, single family homes, and that's what it seems like the majority of Hermantown is, but I'm in favor of looking at other options for people because I realize that not everybody fits into the single family home box, so to say. And also, any economic growth drivers that you can have, either along the highway or in the Hermantown marketplace are a couple of things that you really got to plan for and make sure the city is planning for the long range viability of those by making sure the infrastructure is there for all that stuff.
Yeah, Jeff, I might ask you to go back to our, I think it was the commercially zoned properties in the city. I think that one is really telling. You can see where it's primarily right there. Other than our 53 corridor, we only have like a couple properties that are even could be construed as a neighborhood retail. And, is that something that potentially could be looked at? When Jeff presented to HEDA, there were some discussions about like a mixed use zoning that, you start looking at those maybe along a higher use corridor or maybe some intersections that are traditionally more traffic driven, just to provide some more options. It could be either. It could be some housing, it could be a small commercial business, something that way. Because like I said, once again, I just had a call again today, a property that we probably all know about along Hermantown Road that's been having issues for some time. And a person wanted to put a commercial based business on it. And I said, nope, it's R3. It's a grandfathered non-conforming use, but I don't ever see that property going R3. And I've had 8-10 calls, people wanting to put some sort of a business or service related activity on there. And it's just not conducive, or it's not allowed in the existing ordinance right now.
Are you trying to say that you would have like a stackable zoning in those locations? Like it would be one or the other or both, like they would be overlaid on top of each other?
It could be, or it gives more people, it gives it more flexibility in how it could be developed.
Right.
Right now, we try to use PUDs as some of those things, but the PUDs we've generally been seeing have been residentially driven
Correct.
and not mixed use.
Correct. Yeah, and I can see somebody finally pulling off what I'll refer to as like a lifestyle center. I can see somebody doing that where you've got, office or retail on the first level and then 3, 4, 5 levels of housing above it, like the area up the highway, for example, if the first floor was, commercial uses, and something like that could slide into a couple different locations here in town pretty easily.
When we were on the Blandon Foundation for Hermantown, I attended that. We identified several areas that we thought could be that very thing, and it's never gone anywhere. And I've always kept those back in my mind because I think they fit and they didn't impact negatively the neighborhood because it's already got a feel for that.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're missing the boat. We are really missing the boat, especially offices. We don't have that here. We need this stuff. We need some more commercial within closer to the more residential area.
And then Jeff, I might ask you to maybe just kind of dovetail on that. If you can get this, that pure residentially zoned map. And right here, I think this is a good map because it just shows how geared we are to just 3 types of residential in the city.
Oh, for sure.
And-
Always have been.
I'm sorry.
We always have been.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a question. Do we want to continue to go that way? Do we want to open up some different areas? Do we have different zoning districts?
Well,
And so,
it's hard to do with the aging population of Hermantown that has lived here for decades that fight change. It's true.
yep.
Every time something comes up that's interesting, that people go, well, there was a baseball field on that corner 40 years ago and I used to play on it. Well, it's true, and it's hard to change people's minds and get them to think outside the box, so to speak, to different options for housing. Because again, not everybody wants to own a single family home, but they still want to come here and live in Hermantown.
There's I've had a couple other conversations with, like I said, people that are aging out of their homes or don't live in this community now, but want to age out in this community,
Right.
and they don't have those options.
Absolutely.
They don't exist.
Yeah, so one thing I think would like to get input on is, today, as Eric said, that the R3, that's a big area of the city. Basically, that's the only area that's sewered today or could have water. The other two districts don't have utilities. So what we would want to consider maybe is, are there areas that R3 could stay, but maybe there's portions or areas or corridors of R3 that could become a new district. And maybe it has, maybe the lot size is smaller than half an acre, and or it allows, other housing types like, courtyard cottages or maybe townhouses or, whatever, mixed use. And where are those areas that today are R3 that could be something different?
And it's not to say that you don't have to build to the minimum.
Right.
You can
Right.
still, if you say, I mean, if a developer says, there's land available in this new district, but a half acre lot is proven to me. And you still have the ability to go larger if you so desire
Sure.
in there as well. But we're just trying to provide some flexibility. Because that's one of the comments that I've heard is people generally are concerned about PUDs because they can pop up anywhere. Whereas if we identify at least a corridor or some different areas, at least people know what, could happen there. You take out some of the questions for these people.
I think that's a good point.
Do we have access to these maps or are we going to be able to get them?
I
Yeah,
think right now, I'm sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, we can make this presentation. We're working on putting up a project website. So we could put this on the website, but we can also just send it to Eric and make it available to anybody.
Yeah, we've been working, there's been conversations with Joe Wickland and said how to at least, part of this, our public input as well.
Sure.
And like I said, I really anticipate over here the next 4 to 6 weeks that there's going to be a lot more push out to the general public here as well. So it'll be busy.
And a
Yeah, I
lot of-
guess building on this conversation with housing types too, what if there was, exploration of other housing types other than say single family, or, in the case of this zoning map, housing types that are even smaller lots than the current R3 district, what types of housing do you think people would be interested in Hermantown, and they think it would fit in some places of the city?
I'm going to jump right now. I was just in the Lakeville, Apple Valley area about 2 weeks ago as I drove towards Cedar Avenue. And in a very short run, I saw 3-4 different housing products that say, wow, that would be incredible here. And, on one section was, there were small lots, single family, almost like a cottage style that could be great for affordability prospects. Next to that was, I guess, more what you'd call, I think they're more like the fourplexes, but they're set up as a square as opposed to linear with like some interior courts. And it had some really nice stylings to it. And just say, you see this in other communities, but I think that if people were exposed to some of these things a bit more, that there might be a bit more of an appetite for them or an acceptance, maybe.
That's a good word for it, yeah.
Mhm.
I guess that's just my, just my general thoughts. And I encourage everyone here, same thing as, as you visit different communities or areas, that if you say, hey, that's great. Even snap a photo of it
Mhm.
as we're going through this process. I think it helps out.
I think a challenge, having grown up in Otsego, Minnesota, and witnessed a lot of growth in a short amount of time. And having now living up here in the occupation that I work, where there's a lot of looking into demographics and trends, I think it's kind of a challenge and it's kind of an opportunity for Hermantown and the surrounding areas that a lot of people do live in this area because they don't want to live in the metro and they don't want that community. And the college that I work, that's a big part of how they attract and retain students and faculty and staff. It's a lot different here than it is like in the Twin Cities or some of the other urban areas in the region. So I think there's a lot of challenges there, both with housing, types of housing, lot sizes, business. And I think tying into that too is just the utilities that we have, right? I mean, you're ultimately limited. You can't just go anywhere in Hermantown and zone things out. And what are you gonna do? Run water to the western part of the city and sewer just so you can build in a different area that's underdeveloped? Probably not. And like I agree with what you said, Eric. I think there's a huge opportunity for at least identifying zones around the city where, you know, if you live in a, maybe not acreage area, that's not a very good term, but you don't have a apartment next to the house you've lived in for 50 years and just because someone sold it. Not that there's anything bad with apartment complexes or working in commercial construction, but
I guess maybe add a little bit more, not predictability, but just comfort level for some of these things. Jeff, do you want to get that map up, basically that vacant or undeveloped property map? You think that's one thing that's hard for us as a community? And once again, I'm just going back to Lakeville, where you're converting 300-acre farms to little house seeds. It's very easy to do that. Where
that's what Otsego was.
Yeah, same thing,
My
exactly.
property I grew up on and everything surrounding it was all farmland.
Mhm.
Now it's all $600,000 houses.
Yeah, we're like, you know, we will be more challenged where I can only think like 2 or 3 contiguous properties that have more than 80 or 100 acres. And once again, how much of it's actually buildable in wetland that way. So I think maps like this one right here are good maps as you start seeing, like, oh, wow, there's a nice, you know, a number of parcels that are either vacant or vastly underutilized. But for the most part, you know, especially if you start looking over in the eastern part of the city, not a lot of opportunities for some of these things. And then it gets into what you're saying, Sam, is, yeah, there's more opportunities in the west, but those utilities are decades away. Yeah.
And where the vacant land is here is an awful lot of very wetland.
Exactly.
Very much wetland.
Because I think, Jeff, that was one of the things that we had talked about, is possibly overlaying the wetlands with this map here as well.
That would be.
Yeah. Yeah, we have draft maps of that we're not ready to show tonight, but we have done that. We've also started to we figured out we could map existing lot sizes, say in the eastern half of Hermantown. You know, all the way from the ones that are, you know, half an acre or less, half an acre to 1 acre, and then all the way up. So there are a lot of lots that are, you know, larger at different sizes, that if the minimum lot size changed in some areas, there'd be some additional lots that today don't look vacant because they have a house on them, and they might be, you know, 2.5 acres, they might be 5 acres, they might be 10 acres. But over time, maybe those are lots that people would be interested in, you know, subdividing part of it or something. That would change what this map looks like.
Yeah, I think that'd be a very interesting map, because that's what, you know, there's a lot of, you know, combining between the vacant and such, that there's a lot of acreage properties in the city that are just not, you know, or could be utilized differently.
There's a
people
lot of
so
those
chose
that
to.
don't want.
That don't want to as
To
well.
change that too.
Exactly as well.
But if you did 2 overlays with water, sewer and wetlands, I gotta believe, just looking at that, you're 70, 80% of those properties
Off
Our
the
guy
table.
off the table right
Mhm.
there. And now you look over towards, the eastern side and there's very little left after you do that, those two overlays.
Very much so.
Mhm. And that's been the,
That'd be interesting to
I
see.
played a lot with those, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine.
and that's been the great thing, since obviously we did this 20 years ago, is now with GIS and different mapping abilities, you can see a lot more of that data
Right.
than you could have 20 some years ago.
Yeah, I guess, another thing to think about is, Hermantown's not gonna grow, it's not gonna be huge growth in some ways, so you don't need necessarily a lot of land. But if you're looking to have some of these other housing types, this is the opportunity to say, here's places where we could actually get some housing types and we think they would be acceptable in the community, they'd fit in well. They're near things like, parks or a school or something like that, green space. And you could be proactive about where those places are, but they wouldn't necessarily have to take a lot of land.
Wise land,
Wise land,
I have a
wise
question,
land.
kind of for Eric, I guess. So I like the map that shows like the major arteries and most of the smaller major use roads, and a lot of them are owned by the county. It's come up on different projects. I mean, at what point do you have to take that into consideration, whether it's zoning? I mean, because eventually some of these streets can only handle so much. I mean, even just anecdotally, I notice it driving on different roads during rush hour. And you don't have a lot of control over it because they're county roads, right? And they ultimately will decide to make changes or not. And then I know a lot of other comments that come in with the school. I mean, at what point with either road congestion or capacity in the school district? I mean, at what point is that not a city thing? It's more of a school district thing or a county thing? I mean, where's the separation of that when it comes to like overall planning and adding, like if you want to grow and show areas you can grow, how does that tie into those two?
And I'll start, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
well, I was just gonna say it, in previous meetings we've had so far, one thing that has come up is adding, more road network in some places. So, today I think the basic grid is kind of mile roads. But if there's half-mile roads or just some connections in key places, as you know, there's some places where the lots are really deep because and they probably don't even necessarily want that land for all those lots, but they can't, there's not access to the other part of the lot. So, as an example, if you split up some of those big boxes that you see on the map today, in some manner, that would open up some lots, I guess.
And as part of it too, I guess in twofold, like when we have an application come in, we'll send it out to the school district, the St. Louis County and the plating, things like that for their comments as well. But as part of this comp plan, Jeff has sent me a list, I think it's like 8 or 10 different
Stakeholders.
Stakeholders, thank you, stakeholders, and one of which is St. Louis County, and just talking with them. And I want to say a couple of weeks ago, the city has a yearly meeting with St. Louis County Traffic and said, what plans, what projects do you have this year? What projects do we have? What developments are we all aware of? So we do talk with some different things to try to make each other aware. But they're definitely going to be one group that will be reached out to as part of this comp plan here as well. I think an exciting part will be when Civic Brand comes here at the end of March, and we're working to kind of tie down more what's going to happen in those 2 to 3 days, the extent of public meetings, participations, things like that as well. And I think a big part of a comp plan is, what is people's images of the city, and what do you vision for it? Jeff shared with Joe Wicklund and myself a really neat tool that we're going to be bringing forward here. That was that push pin, lack of better words. Jeff, if you might want to.
Yeah, the platform, I guess, the online platform's called Social Pinpoint. We've been using it a lot. It's basically an interactive map where people can go onto the city's website and they can give input on the map by placing little pinpoints, things, areas of concern, places you think should be preserved, maybe shouldn't change as much, places where you think there's opportunities to look at, say mixed use areas or something like that. But you can zoom in and out on the map and you can leave your input and you can see other people's input. And it's been really helpful for communities to get their input, kind of on a geographic map like that. And that will also have a survey with some questions linked to it as well.
And that's something we think might be rolled out in the next maybe a month or two, or
Yeah, well, we can show you a draft tomorrow, probably. We can roll it out pretty quickly if
okay, well, that's great. All right.
yeah, yep, we can get it out there pretty quickly. Yeah, so we have these questions up. Are there any key challenges that we haven't talked about so far that you think we really need to wrestle with this plan as we get started on, the planning part of it? So far, we've been doing mostly the existing situation.
No, nothing you're not aware of already, just logistics like schools, fire departments, that kind of stuff as the city grows. People are always concerned about that, and of course, utilities.
And the reorganization, I would suggest really looking at, I know that's probably a taboo subject, but the marketplace, re-looking at how that is being zoned and regulated. I think that really needs to be some serious looking in that area.
I guess in what aspect?
It is restrictive enough that we're seeing too many businesses go away. By the time they sit in my office, I tell them it's not going to be a chance to get any further, and they walk away. I don't like having commercial places walk away from our community. And so that's one thing I think we could do much better in re-examining that again. And not a total makeover, just some of the issues need to be looked at carefully. Open it up a little bit.
So kind of the last bullet point.
Yeah, exactly right there. Mhm.
Is it related to the types of uses, or is it the
Not at
standards they have to meet?
the looks, the feel, it's the only place in town that's very restrictive as far as the feel of the property, how the building finally ends out. There's several things in there that it has been just, I mean, look at it, it's still vacant after all this time. And there's reasons of that. If that was a little more open, I know we could have seen a lot more growth there. But there's just no reason to start that down that road if there some, especially with some nationals with changing their models, they want a whole new thing and it just doesn't fit.
It's more the building or the site design requirements.
Right. And we don't
Okay.
have that anywhere else. Why,
Okay.
why are we all of a sudden doing it in that area? I think it was a fun little idea, but I think it's really hurt us.
Are there any other issues along Highway 53 that need to be addressed outside of the marketplace to get more businesses?
Well, there again, we've got a lot of old things that need to be hopefully redressed, and there's a lot of places that they're starting to look at putting on the market to have redevelopment. I think that's going to be really helpful once we get some balls rolling in that way. We're going to see a lot more opportunities for some new buildings to go with some of the other buildings, take over a few buildings and put them back in, but in a new space. Some of that I think is going to look good. Having some that have been remodeled again, it's a great deal. So not much more you could do. We've got a narrow with the airport behind and wetland behind. It's sort of a tough area to hit on.
I think a little bit on the transportation plan, I think we've talked a little bit before about like a backage road,
Mhm.
particularly on the south side of Highway 53. Because as Beth had indicated, it's tough on the north side because we're hemmed in by the airport. But on the south side, we're really, because of lack of that infrastructure, opening up some of these extremely deep lots. I mean, yes, there is a lot of wetland, but there are some other opportunities that you just can't really reach because of the lack of the, roads and utilities going into those.
Mhm. And not being able to turn off 53. They don't want
Yeah.
very many more accesses onto 53. So a backage road would be great.
Mhm.
I think that's an important thing too. And people are used to those. I mean,
Exactly.
Any other input that you think would help us go in the right direction?
I guess the last thing I'll say, and we kind of already mentioned it, but for housing issues and opportunities, my 3 years I've been on here, I think balancing whether it's a planned unit development or different types of housing with the existing R3 and existing property types. I mean, that's the biggest. It takes the most time. And I think I see both sides of the coin. I get where the developer's coming from and I get where the homeowners are coming from. So just, there's got to be a better way to streamline some of that. So it's not such a shock and awe every single time over and over. Where I get where the developer's trying to do, I really do. I get what the homeowners in the surrounding area are coming from. I really, or if it was my property, I really do. So just maybe even just like Eric had mentioned, some direction or mapping out different places in the city here.
Sure, that lends itself a bit better to different types of development that way. Different density, for lack of better words.
mhm.
And that's because today the PUD can, I think somebody said, it can be applied anywhere in theory, right?
I think that's the challenge, right? In every single one. It's, you take residential houses, single family homes, and you want to put anything under the sun almost for PUD. Not really, but
Yeah, it's basically the PUDs fall more into place, obviously outside of your traditional subdivision per se. So we're seeing those generally more along the county roads, some of those things. That's like the gentleman who was here earlier. He was concerned about the possibility apartment would have gone up on this property that we just, spoke of. So, yeah, I mean, the specter of a PUD is out there on different properties.
it's not the PUD in and of itself. It's just more, I wouldn't want to see, I personally wouldn't want to see a map 20 years from now that shows how everything's zoned and the types of housing, and it's just little blurbs all over the city, all hodgepodge. But that's just my personal opinion.
And a lot of it is going to be interesting with growth projections as well. Right now, we typically get about 30 to 35 new house starts a year. And so, and then we've been, obviously is a couple apartments have popped up. One's been built, one keeps getting talked about, but nothing's happened on. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. And like I said, I think at least I'd love to see more opportunities for either the smaller lots for infill, whether it's empty nesters or just people who don't want to maintain a half-acre lot anymore. Give them some more options.
Mhm.
I think our next P and Z meeting, let's say plus or minus March 21. So that'll be before when Civic Brand would be coming here. So I can share with planning and zoning more of the plans, what's gonna happen in that last week of March.
Right,
And, these are, sessions open to, either the different boards or the public in general or what. We're still trying to figure those things out right now. But I hope to share those with you at the next planning and zoning board meeting. So, but Jeff, thanks for your time. I hope we gave you some
yeah,
information and,
Thank you.
yeah. Thanks for all your input. We'll talk to you in March for sure.
well, perfect.
All right.
Yeah, if you just want to give me the host back. And
Okay, let's see. How do I do that?
so often than not, we like, oh, forgot to do that.
And show.
It took me a while to figure it out too.
You feeling passionate about signage tonight?
I'm ready to go. We're gonna be here till midnight.
Just because I said it'd be a quick meeting.
I'm not happy.
I think, Jeff, while you're doing that, maybe,
Yeah. I'm
Well, this-
trying to,
yeah, kind of roll backwards, at least from our standpoint. If we want to entertain a brief discussion just on, I had emailed this to you last week, just some different, I looked at 5 different communities based on, kind of our conversations that we had at the January meeting regarding the sign ordinance. The big questions were, how do we handle, multi-tenant buildings, multi-story buildings, et cetera. So tried to find some different cities throughout the state that probably have addressed this. And I have Blaine, Brainerd, Elk River, Bloomington, Maple Grove in there. I think some of them, at least all those address multi-tenant buildings in some way. Bloomington seemed to be the only one that got into actual multi-story. I'd love to see a 7-story building in Hermantown, but I don't know if we'll ever get to that point. As Joe's rubbing his hands. But, if at least we have an opportunity to start addressing some of these things. So, and I've heard from a couple of you that, you like some of these, they think there's some good ideas.
Mhm.
And maybe I said this, I wish there's more members of the board here tonight, but I'll entertain any, questions or comments you have right now, just to help facilitate when we're back in March together on this.
I guess honestly, I briefly read through this and I'd like to read through it again. And I feel like the whole reason I volunteered for the Planning and Zoning Commission was to help balance, like what a wide variety of opinions. And in terms of commercial signage, I have never thought of it as much as I have to date. But I think Hermantown so far has done a good job. I think there's a lot of, I personally think you could do a lot more signage without making it look like East Central entrance when you're driving down. You see just stuff everywhere. So I think this is I don't think most people honestly think about it, myself included. And so as long as my lay opinion would be, as long as it's not over the top, there would never be an issue. But for what it's worth, that's my 2 cents.
No, that sounds good. And it's good to hear the layperson, because like you said, that obviously a couple of members here or more have, the experience from the commercial standpoint or development standpoint. So it's good to hear, like I said, someone just driving through the community, what they think. There's some talk at last meeting about the ability to have a sign on each side of a building if it doesn't have a road frontage. A couple of these communities address that. Yes, you can have it on all 4 sides. A couple of them says, no, it's just on public roadways. So it's different communities have kind of handled this differently. So, like I said, at least I just wanted to get some information out there that, we're trying to think at our end too, and just to give you a little bit more, background, how some of these communities are handling this.
Some of these are really good. Yeah.
I guess just say it, I guess reiterate what I just said. I think one thing I noticed was I thought central entrance was bad. When you're coming up and you see Advanced Auto and O'Reilly's and McDonald's and Burger King, and there's just a bazillion signs. And I honestly thought the new buildings next to Sam's Club could use more signage and would probably look better. I mean, at least you know what tenants were in there. I'm surprised Famous Dave's didn't want more signage,
I'm shocked too.
but
Remember though, on central entrance, that has been forever an automotive strip, which is a different zoning than downtown or West Duluth.
yep, I get that. I think it's more just if you're, you're driving down the roads in
Right.
Hermantown and not everyone has
Yeah.
a big,
Knowledge of
big
what's
color
going on,
sign
right?
and logos all over and a big, highlighting like everything looks like Subway and McDonald's and Burger King.
Yeah.
It's just in your face.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this last time. I can't name one in Hermantown that's over the top.
Mm-mm.
I did have a chance. I visited that one building you had referenced. And it did, until you said that, it didn't jump out at me. And I was gonna say, and I think it was particularly 1 or 2 users that the sign was like, that's big, that's bright.
Right, but you had to go looking for it.
Yep, exactly.
The
Yeah,
average
the way it's-
person would never see it driving by.
Yeah, it sits back there. I like, a couple of things that jumped out on me here was at least one of the communities had, almost like a guaranteed minimum, for lack of better words, for multi-tenant buildings, which is something that I think has some good merit to it. I think it's interesting as well that I think the majority of this commercial, like we measure ours on a lineal footage of the building, where these other communities seem to go on a square footage of facade.
Right.
So that in the multi-tenant buildings, multi-story buildings, it could help out some of those things. So I think there's
That
some.
never made sense to me why it was just lineal.
It-
It
Mhm.
is that square footage.
Yeah, so I think that gives a little bit more merit, almost if you try to figure out between those two, if you look at total facade and then guaranteed minimums, for lack of better words. That I think that would maybe go a long ways
Huge.
towards at least the people who have more of the commercial interest that
Mhm.
way.
And the last thing you don't want to do is restrict it so much that somebody doesn't want to come, like you were talking
Yeah.
about the marketplace. If there's something that's so restrictive that somebody's like, well, if I can't put my 3 signs up, I'm not coming. You just don't want to cross that line to try and be that restrictive. I mean, again, I'll say the same thing I said last time. I don't want it to look like a NASCAR where it's got the sticker on every square inch. I get that, but.
We're a long way from there to here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's a huge difference between what we have now, because again, I can't think of one in Hermantown that is over the top and shouldn't be allowed. I look at all of them because that's kind of the world I live in, but I understand not wanting it to be the extreme on the other side of that either.
I didn't bring my stuff tonight, so I apologize, but there was a reference in one that if you didn't fall under their criteria, you could work with the city basically. It's almost like it's like a sign special use. It's how I think of it in my mind. Do you think there's any opportunity for something like that where you can have some sort of, not appeal process maybe, but if it's really within reason, you're requesting something that technically doesn't fit, so that not every single person can just say, well, I want to do whatever I want, but you could try to, or would that be way too hard from the city's perspective?
I guess we'd have to think about that because part of it gets more into, lack of better, it's the logos. I think, because we've tried to work around that in the past, where we have some some communities measure trapezoids and triangles and squares and circles and get a full on square footage. We in the past, at least, have tried to let's actually look at the sign band per se. And maybe some of these other pieces just discount. So I mean, we do have some flexibility at that point. And when we were talking about it at the staff point, we did not want to write it so tight that there wasn't the room for some interpretation. So I think that at least from a staff standpoint, and even talking to our city attorney, that we still want to keep it that way, that we still have some openness in an interpretation of it, but still provide enough guidelines that people know what we're trying to accomplish. It's almost the same that we went through this with the PUD. It was the same thing too, that we enacted some more requirement standards per se, but we still had that ability to work with the developer to create something. I guess that's what I would ask, in the next month's period, if you have a chance to kind of look through these. I think these are good examples that kind of hit on what we were trying, the questions that we had last month. And just, be prepared back on the 16th to have a bit more of a conversation with this. And I don't know necessarily if we will have an ordinance at that meeting. More than likely, it would probably come to April. But at least have one more good discussion to try to hammer some of these things out, discuss these things, and then come forward in April then with basically an ordinance at that point.
Sounds good. Perfect. Good. Any other questions or comments on the sign stuff this evening? Not seeing any, we'll move on. Number 8, any other communications, Eric?
No, there's not.
Number 9, commission member reports. Beth Wenzloff,
No report?
Samuel Clark,
No report.
Buckley Simmons,
report.
myself, nothing this evening. We look for a motion to adjourn. It's currently 8:28.
Clark with a motion to adjourn.
Thank you for that. Can we get a second?
Let's left second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll close the meeting at 8:28 PM.